educational bodies, local government, and other public interest groups that have so far signed on. We're all today calling on President-elect Obama, his administration, and the incoming Congress to make the development and rapid implementation of a comprehensive national broadband strategy a national priority in 2009. There's no question, I believe, that high-speed and affordable broadband has become the essential infrastructure of this new century and new economy. The breadth and diversity of the coalition you'll hear from today reflects a unique attribute of broadband, and one that we need to really keep in mind. And that is that broadband is an input into everything else. Advanced communication networks enhance healthcare, educational opportunity, energy efficiency, public safety, more efficient government service delivery, accessibility for people with disabilities, and myriad other things, including innovations that we can only dream of. Because broadband is an input into everything else, and because it has become a key catalyst for innovation, job creation, educational opportunity, and democratic discourse, broadband and digital inclusion generate enormous positive externalities that justify investments far in excess of what any individual firm or industry could justify or manage on its own. That is why, just like the essential infrastructure investments that undergirded progress in the 20th century, things like the electrical grid, the national highway system, and other transportation, we need an affirmative framework for a national broadband strategy. And that's what you'll hear about today. So with that, I would like to turn it over for a moment to Jim Baller, who will talk a bit about the substance of our call to action, and then we'll go on to two panels of us representing some of the members of this very broad coalition. Jim Baller is a principal of the Baller-Herbst Law Group, and he's really the primary mover of this coalition effort. A little bit like a snowball he's been rolling, gathering us up with his enthusiasm over the course of the past 4 or 5 months. And so thank you, Jim, for all your work on this.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I am extremely gratified for the size of the audience. I know many of you out there have worked very hard to make this day possible, and it's only the beginning. I would like in particular to thank Gary Bowles and David Eisenberg, who from the very beginning have been working on this with me, and my partners, especially Casey Lyde, who's out there. This process has consumed countless hours, but it's been a labor of love and joy. I guess Lily Tomlin once said, if love is the answer, we should rephrase the question, but positive, constructive spirit is extremely important. As most of you know, I've been calling for a national broadband strategy for a very long time, and now it has gotten to the point where many of us have recognized the need for such a strategy, and we've, I believe, moved to the next phase, which is to try to define what the components of such a strategy ought to be, and if possible, reach deeper consensus on what the outcome should be of some of those components. I, as many of you, believe that there's no single strategy, that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to the challenges that America faces, that all of us have contributions to make in this process, and that we need to put aside the kinds of competitiveness and antagonisms that we've experienced all too often in years past, and push as hard as we can toward consensus on how to move forward as a country. We can quarrel about statistics, what the statistics mean, which ones are most important and which are not, but we all, I believe, share the sense that if the United States is not as bad as the situation for the United States is not as bad as some say, that there is an amazing amount of room for improvement and opportunity for all of us if we set our visions high enough to achieve them, that the energy that will be created by our working together to produce solutions to meet those challenges will itself be a great contribution, especially in these times of economic challenge. So I'm here today to issue not one, but two calls to action. The first one is the formal document that you picked up on your way in. I trust that you've all got a copy of that. It's not long, and I won't spend a long time this morning going through the details of it, but just structurally, every word of this, every line and sentence was heavily negotiated by a broad range of organizations. And so I will not attempt to characterize it. The document speaks for itself. And I can assure you that every I and T in this statement was very carefully considered. And so we begin with the challenge that we recognize together, the opportunity that we recognize together, and that leads us all to the conclusion that, quote, the United States urgently needs a comprehensive national broadband strategy. We then go on and set forth a framework, policy framework for developing such a national broadband strategy that includes goals, 5 of them, and they may seem to some of you to be mealy-mouthed and watery, but there are important principles in these goals that reflect the fact that we don't yet have full consensus on how to reach those goals, but we are beginning to evolve a sense of what those goals should be. We also set forth a framework for dealing with policies to stimulate high-speed broadband investment, policies to stimulate high-speed broadband adoption and use, and policies for stimulating means of assessing and accounting for how well we're doing. To me, the most important paragraph of all in this statement is the last one, and that one I will read to you word for word. While we urge policymakers and other citizens to adopt the framework presented above, it is only a first step in the process of developing a national broadband strategy. Representatives of the undersigned entities will continue to work together to address key issues and policy priorities. In the spring of 2009, we will hold an event to present more specific policy recommendations to President Obama, Congress, and the American people. And that, to me, is the most important paragraph of all, because what we have achieved today, as important as some people think that is only the beginning. In my view, there is nothing that we Americans can't do if we put our minds to it and engage in a constructive dialogue with a mission of making it happen. And so I issue my second call to action to all of the organizations that have already joined in this initiative, and those who are considering it, and all who are watching this program, to step forward and work with us to make sure that we get this done and get it done right. Thank you very much. And with that, And with that, let me call to the podium Ken Paris, who is an economist with the Communications Workers of America and the president of the Alliance for Public Technology. And I'd just like to say to Ken, we've had many people who have worked on this call to action. It was originally Ken's idea, and he's worked tirelessly to help shape the event, to bring members into the coalition, and it's been a terrific pleasure working with you, Ken.
Thank you, Jim, for those kind words, and thank you for adjusting the mic down. A note of appreciation first to the Communications Workers of America and to the Alliance for Public Technology for their long-term commitment to making sure that broadband, high-speed broadband, becomes available to everyone. And also a note of appreciation for all the groups that signed on. It's an amazing, amazing list. Such a broad array of groups that you might not think would be aligned together. But the importance of this issue is such that groups from across the political spectrum and economic spectrum have signed on. My job is to set the table for this first panel. I want to set some of the context here. We know we're in the midst of a major economic crisis. That's not news, obviously. We can see it everywhere. We can see it in our neighborhoods with declining home values, people we know or have heard about who are unemployed or their jobs are unstable. We see it in newspapers, the stock market going down. The evidence is right before our eyes. It's palpable. But what we might not realize is that we're also in the midst of an economic transformation. The very underpinning of our economy is changing. So this 21st century economy, it will be defined by pipelines. But these pipelines will not carry oil. They'll carry megabits. They won't just be buried in the ground, they'll also be through the airways. And this call to action recognizes the need for a comprehensive national broadband strategy that in effect will have to do double duty. It'll address the current crisis by stimulating investment, jobs, and output, and it'll speed the transformation of our economy for the long-run benefit of everyone. The call to action is based on precedents in our history. Our country has a long history of instituting massive national strategies to support cutting-edge technologies. In the 19th century, we had national strategies for canals, railroads, the telegraph. In the 20th century, we had national strategies for telephones, electricity, and our highway system, all geared to bring and extend the benefits of these technologies to as broad a range of groups as possible. Now, we're in the 21st century, and a new national policy to stimulate high-speed broadband and adoption should be instituted. And that's the framework that's offered in the call to action. It rolls out this policy framework in the tradition of U.S. policy that recognizes that the U.S. is a mixed economy, so that the transformation to a new economy will require supportive efforts and concerted action by both the private and public sectors. So with this in mind, the members of this particular panel have been asked to address two major areas. First, how does this policy framework identified in the call to action not only address the needs of their particular constituencies, the people on this panel, but also the entire U.S.? And two, how do such policies not only address the current economic crisis, but also the transformation of the U.S. to a 21st century economy? Now, this panel is both prestigious and impressive. And it includes, in alphabetical order, Jim Ciccone. Hey, Jim. He's Senior Executive Vice President for External and Legislative Affairs at AT&T. AT&T is the largest telecommunications carrier in the world. Larry Cohen, President of the Communications Workers of America. That's the largest telecommunications union in the world. Ben Scott, Director of Policy at the Free Press. It's one of the largest public interest groups concerned with communications in the U.S. and possibly the world. and Rick Witt, Washington Telecom and Media Council at Google. And from what I've seen in the press and on Yahoo.com and stuff like that, the largest internet provider in the world. So what we'll do is go through, and each of these people, illustrious panel members, will make a statement, 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll take some questions. So again, in order of the alphabet, Jim?
Sorry about that. Really, I want to thank everybody that organized this event today. First of all, I think it's something pretty special in Washington when so many different interests and different constituencies can come together. And I think it should impress upon all of us the importance of the subject that brings us together. The internet itself is, I don't need to tell anybody in this room, is one of the most revolutionary changes in technologies that we've seen. It's had an effect on our society that's profound, and I think which we're only starting to come to grips with. It's for the first time in human history democratized the availability of knowledge. Anybody with a broadband connection and access to the internet has access to all the world's accumulated knowledge. This is going to be the essential infrastructure for the 21st century, just as essential as highways and railroads and shipping infrastructure was to the last several centuries. It is crucial to this country's economic growth and global competitiveness in a world that is becoming increasingly competitive. It's crucial to our children. It's crucial to growth in this country. It's crucial to future jobs and frankly, to current jobs. Brookings Institution has estimated that each percentage of broadband adoption in America adds 293,000 private sector jobs. Connected Nations estimated that increased broadband adoption could create or retain 2.4 million jobs per year, accounting for $134 billion in direct economic benefits. Wireless broadband, whose adoption could be especially important in rural areas, could add $860 billion, it's estimated, over the next decade to the economy. But this type of infrastructure is also crucial in terms of the environment. Anyone concerned about climate change, which probably should be all of us, should pay attention to the fact that broadband adoption in and of itself, it's estimated, could cut CO2 emissions in the U.S. by 13 to 22% from what they'd otherwise be between now and the year 2020. And that's certainly a start, a good down payment on the effort we need to make in this area. I'm a little daunted being here with Larry Cohen because he's been one of the leading apostles at CWA on broadband deployment for years now, emphasizing the importance of this to the economy and to the future of the country, and emphasizing the importance of continuing to deploy, get everybody connected, increasing speeds. And AT&T, we've taken that to heart. As many of you know, we're investing pretty heavily in this area right now. Last year we invested about $18 billion in maintaining, upgrading our network infrastructure, getting people connected. Almost all of this is broadband related. We'll spend about the same amount this year, and hopefully nearly the same amount next year. But this is not just about getting people connected. I know that's the thing most people think about, but it's also about upgrading the networks to deal with the increased traffic from that internet usage. It's not just more people on the internet, but it's the different types of traffic that are really stressing the networks themselves. And so this past June, we actually completed and turned on I think the biggest upgrade of internet backbone in America essentially rebuilt the entire internet backbone of AT&T with OC 768 switching. For those of you who don't understand the details of that, it quadrupled the capacity of the AT&T backbone. Now that's just keeping pace with the growth of internet traffic, which is doubling every couple of years, it's estimated. But these types of investments are not just crucial to our economic growth in the future, but they also mean jobs today. And I know that's something that Larry and CWA are very attuned to, certainly within AT&T. I think currently we have, Larry, the largest full-time union workforce in America at AT&T, and a great partner in the CWA in getting this done. We're also partnering with them to bring overseas jobs back to this country, 5,000 this past year from overseas that had been outsourced by Bell South that will be coming back working directly on broadband. So what we're doing at AT&T is trying to make our commitment real, both in terms of dollars, but also in terms of the work we're generating here. And I think that what's important here in this call to action today is its timeliness as the new administration comes in, focuses on what's important, what are the priorities for economic recovery and for the economic future of this country. I think we're all coming together to say that a national broadband strategy for this nation is an essential component of that recovery and success in our economy are utterly dependent on the need to keep moving in a positive direction in terms of the deployment and adoption of these broadband technologies. Thank you.
Next is Larry Cohen, President of CWA.
And to figure out if it's alphabetical by organization or by last name or by first name, see, it's never clear. Anyway, great to be here. This is great that we're working together. I'm going to try to focus on things that weren't said yet. Most of the really important things have been said, and I return the compliments to Jim Ciccone. I think a lot of what CWA is able to do is because we're trying to shape an industry, not just be shaped by it. And led by Jim, really, this company, which is the largest employer of our members, over 180,000, but also the largest telecom in the world. And I think if we can figure out, one message from today is how we get NGOs, including unions, government, and corporate America to come together around this strategy, I think it's likely to succeed. And I think that's really my main message, is keeping the three partnerships, not only CWA, but other NGOs like Free Press, Alliance for Digital Quality, the TIER, Connected Nation. There's many others that have signed on to the call to action. We have to help define the public interest in this, and also actually create public interest in this. So I really want to just focus on three things. The first, for several years, as Jim mentioned, CWA has championed this campaign called Speed Matters, and there's a website easy to find, speedmatters.org, to try to make Americans aware of internet speed, not just this word broadband, which until earlier this year, the FCC finally upped a little bit the definition, but broadband in the US was defined at 1/4 of a megabit, a pathetic speed by world standards. It's now only 3/4 of a megabit downstream, and what we're really trying to say to America in the Speed Matters campaign, and it's much of what's in this call to action, is speed does matter. The 30 OECD economies, depending on how you measure it, we're between 15th and 20th on speed, as well as broadband access. And so it's really the two things. One is, how are we going to define broadband? We need to continue to raise that up. Senator Rockefeller calls for 10 megabits downstream and at least 1 megabit upstream by 2010. That's only, less than 2 years away. So obviously, the race is on if we're going to come anywhere near that goal, which CWA endorses. So speed matters, that's number one. And when we talk about global competition, we're dropping like a rock in terms of internet speed because, in fact, we have no national strategy and we have no national policy. The other 15 to 20 countries in the OECD, again, out of 30, that are ahead of us, they have a national policy. They have defined goals, like 10 in 2010. They have a way to get there. As Ken said, just like the canals that were built in the 19th century, the roads, the telegraph, the telecom itself in the 20s, we need to have a strategy, we need to have goals, and then we need to implement. And so we come to the second issue, jobs, and the framework of economic recovery. We would argue that not exclusively broadband development, but as much as any single thing, investments in broadband as part of the economic recovery and stimulus will have the highest multiplier effect, as high a multiplier effect as any other investments. And we all know that to come out of the slump that we're in this country or any country in the world, you need something with a multiplier effect. We're not just paying to create, for instance, the 100,000 jobs that we estimate can be generated by a $5 billion government stimulus, which again we can bring out and exactly how we do that. If there's questions, it's also in the material that we've given out here today. That, that those 100,000 jobs, which would be to build out the broadband that we have right now, then lead to literally 2 million more jobs as you bring genuine high-speed internet, world-class, moving towards at least 10 megabits a second downstream to underserved communities, and at the same time generate demand. So again, in our statement, groups like Alliance for Digital Equality focus on particularly urban America. How do we generate demand? How do we create digital ambassadors in communities so that we can create the demand that, along with government incentives, can incent companies like AT&T, Verizon, others that have signed on to this statement to actually do the build out. So those are really the three things. Speed matters. These are jobs that if we invest in them and we have a policy that speed matters and we're going to cover this country over the next 2 years with at least 10 megabits downstream, that will generate at least 100,000 more jobs in the industry. It's about a 10% increase in the industry. It's about 1 million jobs now in that part of the industry. That then leads to higher demand because it's available. And then on the content side of the industry, where we also have 100,000 other CWA members, we're talking about journalists and broadcasting and everything else, that also leads to more jobs there. But most importantly, in the communities that are now underserved, that become served, we create an incredible stimulus that can lead to all kinds of economic development and economic investment, and it's exactly what we need to get America going again. Thank you.
Ben Scott, Director of Policy at Free Press.
Good morning. It's been so long since I've been on a panel where I wasn't meant to debate somebody, I'm not sure how to begin. National Broadband Strategy has a nice ring to it, and it sounds like something that's hard to be against. And judging from everybody that's in the room, no one's against it, which is great. What that means is that what we're doing today is we're announcing a starting point and not an end point, despite all the hard work that Jim and others have done to bring us all together. This is the beginning of a longer process. Setting out a framework implies that we're going to fill in that framework at some point. That is the better part of the work that we have before us, both the test of this group and the strength of the results that we produce. I think when I was sat down last night to prepare for this morning, I thought, well, I'll read back through the broadband papers that have been written in the last couple of years on what the problems are and what we got to do about it. And what I realized is that a lot of these papers have the same theme. And let me summarize it for you. They begin and they say, broadband, and then they end and they say, yay. Everybody agrees we ought to have more broadband, it'll be faster, it'll be cheaper, it'll be everywhere, but there isn't, and it's going to have all of these wonderful benefits, but the middle part, sort of a question mark about how we get there. Now, as everybody's pointed out, the stakes are very high, both for the economy and for the social development of this country. It's also about the future of the media. The internet is increasingly the delivery platform for all media and communications for every citizen. So from a consumer perspective, it's about more than dollars and cents and infrastructure growth. It's about what our democracy looks like when everybody's connected to the internet, which I think we got a glimpse of in the last in the election, which was, I thought, a fantastic perspective on what the future of civic engagement looks like. So I think the place to start with a national broadband strategy is what are the problems? We've got to identify the problems. So two big problems. One is availability. Got to get broadband out into rural areas where it isn't. That's the problem that I think has gotten the most attention here in the Congress over the last couple of years. But the second problem, which I think is probably the bigger problem, is adoption. Why aren't people buying broadband even though it's available today? So let's break down the adoption problem. What are the key questions we ought to address? Well, as Larry pointed out very well, number one question is speed. From a consumer perspective, what does speed mean? What does 10 megabits mean? It means more cool stuff to do on the internet. And you got to make it cheaper to buy so that people decide, hey, the cool stuff that you can do on the internet because it's fast is worth my $30 a month. And you got to give them tools. You got to give them the equipment to get online. A substantial portion of the people who don't buy internet access today don't buy it because they don't have computers. Pretty significant problem that we ought to address. People don't have technology training. I think we often forget in this age of digital communication when all of us are carrying Blackberries and cell phones that not everybody has the training to use computers. So you think about speed and you think about price. Those are supply side problems. Essentially, how do we increase the value proposition of broadband for the consumer? How do we get broadband penetration rates up where cable television and cell phone rates are? How do we make broadband the same kind of attractive product that television and mobile telephony are for consumers today? Because cable and cell phones, while wonderful for those who have them, don't provide the same social and economic benefits as broadband. So that's our fundamental question on the supply side, and I would submit that the two areas of interest for this coalition will be what does competition policy look like and what does infrastructure policy look like to increase the value proposition, the speed and the price for the end user. And then the third piece is the demand side policies. How do we build social programs to get computers and training into the hands of people who don't have it? You don't need training to turn on cable TV or to open up your cell phone, but you do need training to learn how to use the internet. You do need a computer in order to get online. So these are problems that we have to address as a starting point. So next year, I'll say we need bold leadership. We need aspirational leadership. We need to put new ideas on the table. We need to have a broader debate. And we need to begin by assessing the last 8 years. What went wrong, what went right, what did we learn, and what do we need to do going forward? Number two, we need to use the data that we've gathered at the Commission. One of the most, I think, significant developments of the last year is that the FCC has managed to fix its broadband data collection problem, and as of next summer, we'll have an unprecedented level of understanding about what's happening out in the country. We need more data collection in order to be smarter policymakers. Third, we need to start a robust debate, not just here in Washington, but outside the Beltway. And that, I think, is one of the fundamental roles of nonprofit organizations like mine that have public membership. Our goal is to engage more people in this process. We have an initiative that we're working on now, which is a nice parallel to the National Broadband Strategy, which is called Internet for Everyone. We've got our first big town meeting in Los Angeles on Saturday, which we're hoping will generate a lot of enthusiasm outside the Beltway about how do we get at this broadband problem. How do we put internet into everyone's home? Now, let me just leave you with this idea that now is not a time for incrementalism. Now is not a time to say, well, here's where we are now, let's just take it up a couple of notches and everything will be all right. Let me submit that the halo of this transformational moment extends well beyond the White House, all the way down into Southwest over the FCC. And I look forward to working with these guys and all of you on our common challenges. Thanks a lot.
Rick Witt from Google.
Thanks, Ken, and good morning, everybody. First, all thanks to Jim Baller for his hard work, his dedication, and incredible patience in terms of pulling together this impressive collaboration of diverse groups of industry leaders, public interest groups, unions, and others. I'm pleased to be representing Google here today. We were excited to be able to contribute to this effort during the course of the past year, and now to be a signatory to the call to action document. From a public policy perspective, the importance of broadband is not what it is, but what it enables. It is broadband's with which, rather than its for which, that counts most for most people. To be clear, broadband is not necessarily synonymous with internet access. Acting as a means of allowing consumers to interact with the full capabilities of the web is but one of the potentially many useful things that broadband can do for us. What brings us all here today is broadband's role as the connective platform upon which the internet can operate in an optimal fashion. To resort to basic economics 101, as Michael Calabrese mentioned earlier, it's all about the positive externalities of the net, the multiplier effect. It's these so-called innovation spillovers that hold the promise to get our economic engine moving forward again. As the call to action document puts it, the broadband-enabled internet has become, quote, a catalyst for innovation, economic growth, job creation, educational opportunity, and global competitiveness. And so much more is promised in terms of the economic, social, political, and individual benefits in the years ahead. And yet broadband does not simply become an optimal platform for the internet. I would suggest that we require 3 layers of broadband functionality to fully support an open and generative internet, each of which is touched on to some degree in the call to action. First, as Ben and others have mentioned here already, we need the availability and the adoption of broadband infrastructure, meaning more competitive, more ubiquitous, more mobile platforms at faster speeds and with greater uptake by consumers. Second, we need enough raw capacity available on those broadband pipes to support robust net access. You can think of this as the sufficiency of net carriage. And third, we need open and neutral on-ramps to the net itself as a way of maintaining the integrity of internet access. Of course, the U.S. government must also step forward and help us sort out what public policy changes are necessary to foster broadband as an optimal internet platform. Google welcomes the opportunity to work with this coalition with policymakers in 2009 and beyond to craft, adopt, and implement a national broadband strategy that can maximize the amazing potential of a broadband-enabled internet. Thanks.
Let's take about 10 minutes or so of questions. When you have a question in your call, please state your name and the group you represent.
Hi, my name is Drew Clark. I run a website called broadbandcensus.com. We're a proud signatory of this call to action, and we're also the host of the Broadband Breakfast Club every month. My question is for Larry Cohen, but I'd be interested in the perspective of anyone else who'd like to offer it. You mentioned speedmatters.org, your website, and you've clearly put a lot of resources and effort into this, and you've been able to generate a lot of speed tests on your site. We also have a speed test on broadbandcensus.com. We haven't been at it as long, but when someone takes our speed test, all of the data about the carrier that they're using goes onto a Creative Commons site so that consumers and citizens can see what speeds carriers by name are actually offering in particular areas. I'm wondering what would be the pros and any cons from your perspective of making that kind of change to speedmatters.org so that consumers and citizens could see how carriers in zip codes and counties, states nationwide were stacking up against their promised speeds.
I think, there's no downside to that really. When we started speedmatters.org and the speed test, our purpose, goes to Ben's point really, was to say to the FCC and to Congress and to state governments really, we need to document speed. Nobody was particularly interested in speed. We had this catch-all word, broadband. And so, again, the question is, within zip codes, the validity of the sample, if you now break it down another way by carrier, I don't remember now, the numbers, particularly by state, of those who have taken the test, and then we generate our data from that. Data which now shows an average speed for broadband users in the U.S. of a little over 2 megabits a second. Now again, that's a lower speed than what the industry reports. They're reporting 4, but this is hundreds of thousands of tests. So I think there's nothing wrong with doing that. We just have to be sure that the standard deviation on the data was met. Statistical testing to make sure that we didn't, that the data held up. The other thing about Speed Matters is that we actually encourage people from different locations to take the test. They're using a laptop or an iPhone or whatever, and so we get different data points from different locations. What we don't want to have is that I know they would never do this, but the industry itself try to load up because they want to drive up their numbers in a given location. So I think we would have to again, I know no one in the industry would ever do this, but the idea. I remember when a friend of mine's kid was basketball player at university, and the all-star team got picked by how many hits you got on the website. So she went around, generating thousands of people, and we had to do it, like 50 times a day. And so I think, the only downside of that is the science and how we would then make sure that we really were talking about unique users and that we had, a sample that would hold up. But I think it's great to try that, and obviously we want to increase awareness, and competition is definitely one of the ways to do that. So we would applaud what you're doing, and we're going to collaborate about how we go forward in the future. Again, I think Ben's point is key, though. We're spending, huge amounts of government money on the FCC. We want them to collect the data. We actually passed, and the president signed Senate Bill 1492. One of the things we talk about in the stimulus is that we need to fund 1492. It got no funding. So if we're serious about data collection, it's not a huge amount of money, but we need to spend, additional resources on that kind of data collection, as well as, the NGO data collection that you're doing and that we do on the Speed Matters site. But, we applaud you for what you're doing as well.
Anyone else want to comment?
Maybe just one quick comment, because I think Larry certainly covered a good part of the testing scenario. There's one other aspect to that, and I think that goes to your point about making sure customers are getting what they're paying for. I think in the industry here, because of the different infrastructures that are out there, the speeds can vary. They can vary based on how many people are online at any one time. The cable system itself is structured very differently than the DSL architecture is. And so when you hear carriers advertise speeds up to X, we do have a customer service issue there, because we're not giving them a floor. And I think that when we're offering different tiers of speeds for different prices, that we have to be cognizant that people are expecting that if they're paying for a middle tier, that their speed shouldn't fall below a certain level. And so that's one of the reasons that AT&T is come out. I think we were one first, maybe still the only, I don't know, company that's actually promised that we're going to have minimums and maximums on those tiers, so people understand when they buy a tier of service that their speed won't fall below a certain level. And I think there are many out there that will be careless on that one.
Hi, Ann Weigel with Communications Daily. I wonder if you could explain, I have two questions. One is whether you're confident that the things you're talking about could converge into the economic stimulus package that Congress and the administration are working on. And secondly, how all of your goals fit in or would possibly conflict with the efforts to have net neutrality legislation.
Are you asking that of any particular person?
Anyone that wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'll just, go ahead, Vince. Yeah, I'll do the stimulus, actually do both, but I think what you see in the call to action is convergence around what an open internet means, along with, reasonable network management. If we split hairs, there still may be some differences on that, but I think we all agree you have to have an open internet. It's part of creating the demand and the kind of society we want. But on the recovery, let me just say that economic recovery, more so than stimulus, I mean, there's a slight difference between the two, but we can use both terms if you like. Jobs is the best single stimulus. because you need to sustain buying power. We still have the consequences of a rebate check. It's here 1 minute, it's gone the next, and it doesn't really create anything that's with staying power. And so, I think many of us here, the four of us, maybe all of us, would argue that, creating jobs that in themselves create ongoing services is critical. And so, yes, we are pushing very hard with this government and the transition that a key part, and actually a part where you can get an incredible return on the dollar of the recovery plan includes incentives, the private-public partnerships that we talked about, as well as on the demand side, working with NGOs so that underserved communities, we help create demand there for internet. And we're reasonably confident that if we work together like we are here, that we can actually see broadband incentives in the economic recovery package, in January.
Let me suggest that a broadband strategy implies a combination of policies and also a sequence of policies. So I wouldn't expect to see everything in the kitchen sink and stimulus bill. That will be one part of a much broader and longer term set of policies to accomplish the goals set out in this document. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see broadband policy in the stimulus bill, but I wouldn't expect that to cover all the territory in the call to action. I think that would be too tall of an order and an impossible task. Second point on your second question, on the question of net neutrality, I think what you're pointing out there is the work ahead of the coalition. You bring together a lot of folks on the strategy, and we don't yet have the specific policies to fill in that strategy. That means we're going to have to resolve those problems that have divided us in the past. One way or the other, they're going to be resolved. Whether that's to the satisfaction of every single signatory on this list, well, probably not, but in some ways they'll be satisfactory to, I think, the majority.
Just, I know it's hard to have a discussion about broadband without the words net neutrality coming up. But I think it's important to recognize that we've come a long ways in that debate. And while I don't think there's perfect uniformity or necessarily agreement on every point, I do think that the debate has evolved quite a bit from where it started, and is frankly a lot more narrow now than it was. I think that AT&T certainly recognizes I think the importance of our explicit commitment to an open internet and preserving customer choice on the internet. We have committed to that, and we believe strongly in it. I think some that may not have always felt we were that committed hopefully feel different about that. At the same time, I think those who have disagreed with us in that debate also understand and seem much more accepting of the importance of flexibility in terms of network management, the importance of having reasonable network management techniques allowed so that you can keep these networks running. And I think the other thing that's happened in this debate, of course, is that the FCC's broadband principles have really been tested, and I think have been shown that they will work, and that they are flexible enough to deal with a number of different eventualities, and the FCC is prepared to enforce them, and we're very supportive of that. So I think it's important to recognize that debate, while it's still there, has evolved quite a bit, and I think that whatever differences remain are much more narrow, I think, than they were at one time, and I think that does make it easier for us to come together on an issue of this nature.
Just a quick point on that, on your second question. I think over the past 3 years, unfortunately, the network neutrality debate turned into, I think, a confusion over means versus ends. And I think what you're seeing today here is an important recognition by the signatories to this document that there is general support as the end game for an open internet. How you get there, we may end up in terms of disagreements over legislative or regulatory strategies, coming up next year. But I think, as Jim mentioned, I think there was, unfortunately for both sides, I think there was this lack of appreciation for what folks were standing for. So I think the end game of an open generative internet is what unites us here today. What may divide us in certain measures down the road is how you get there.
We don't have time for more questions for this particular panel, but people will be available after the second panel when that ends. So if you could save your questions for this particular group for later, that would be great. Just to sum up, obviously, you see with this call to action, like Rick was saying, this whole range of groups that have stood on different sides in a whole host of issues for many years, UNEP, net neutrality, you name them, have come together because of the importance of what Rick says is the end, which is bringing the benefits and potential of the internet economically, in terms of communications, media, democracy, health, all those things that are listed in the call to action statement. Everyone's willing to work together, and that'll lead to the next step in this process that Jim alluded to and we'll talk about more later, in terms of getting, and Ben mentioned, and all the speakers have mentioned, in terms of getting the specifics. There's a big step forward to get the policy framework. Now our task will be to get more specific, and as specific as we can. But what's different now is that there's this framework there, and there is the desire to invest time and money and energy into working out more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you, members of the panel. I'm going to call the second panel to come up, and manufacturing issues and educational issues and the science of innovation, how that happens, and the effect on cities and states and local governments, and as well on the perspective of foundations and charitable institutions in this work. And let me begin by introducing the moderator of this panel. She is Diane Duffy, the Executive Director of Business Development of Telcordia. And Diane, let me turn this over to you. Thank you.
Obviously, I'm very happy to be here to support the call to action and represent Telcordia Technologies. So from our beginnings as part of Bell Labs, Telcordia has developed technology breakthroughs that have shaped our industry. Today, we provide software applications, business operations support, network engineering, and leading-edge research to communications companies and state and federal entities worldwide. Our track record of innovation has helped to design, build, and manage the world's largest and most complex telecommunications and information networks. Telcordia engineers play pivotal roles in steering the future of communications through standards bodies and advanced technology forums. So it is with this depth of expertise and this heritage of innovation that we join the call to action. We believe that an affordable and robust broadband infrastructure that reaches every citizen, business, and institution is both a competitive necessity and an achievable goal. Reaching the goal will require contributions from many areas, and that's why we are particularly proud to join the many signatories and the breadth of this call. In particular, technology breakthroughs will be needed to make ubiquitous broadband a reality. Telcordia is uniquely prepared to contribute to these technology challenges, and we look forward to working with everybody to make this a reality. As Jim said in the second panel, the speakers will address in their remarks two general areas. One is sort of an overall question as to how the policies outlined in the call to action statement can stimulate employment to address the current crisis, as well as offer high economic and social returns for the future of our country. The second area is more specific, and that is to touch upon why their specific group has committed time and effort to the call to action, and how the policy framework will address the needs of their group and their membership. So we will now turn to the speakers, and this is in a random order as it was given to me, so not alphabetical. So first will be Grant Seifert, the president of the Telecommunications Industry Association, then Charles Benton, the president of the Benton Foundation, Mark Luker, the vice president of EDUCAUSE, Robert Atkinson, the president of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, and lastly, Libby Beatty, the executive director of the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors. So, Grant.
Good morning, and thank you, Diane, and thank you, Jim, for all your hard work in pulling this diverse group together. I'd also like to thank my other colleagues and signatories to this grand effort. TI is proud to associate itself with this effort for a national broadband strategy. Many of you know that TI represents over 500 equipment vendors and high-tech suppliers in this space. I don't have to tell you, picking up the paper every day, there's not good news going on in our current sector of the industry with job loss. And so I want to talk a little bit about how this call to action is critical to the success of the U.S.-based equipment industry's success and survival in this global economy. Many of you know that broadband deployment is should be, and we argue should be, included like other infrastructures, that it generates job growth and stimulates the economy in these areas. It's been mentioned before, it's an enabler of different parts of the economy. Certainly critical to our public safety components, energy production and efficiency, transportation, education, healthcare, and the list goes on. So the benefits of investing in broadband infrastructure continue well beyond that initial investment. This industry, as I mentioned, has been impacted by the negative macroeconomic downturn. And so from a TI perspective, we're looking for certainty in regulation, certainty in capital markets, and certainly we believe that those initial investments should not be burdened with unfunded mandates or regulatory requirements that take away some of the uncertainty. So I am optimistic that this group, this call to action, can put aside some of the debates that have been taking place for the last 10 years. The question that I was here to answer is that the debate for broadband strategy has been called for many years. And so again, compliments to Jim for finally pulling all these diverse groups in Washington together. We've seen a downturn in the past, and we weathered the storm. Well, there's two things I want to make sure that come out of this meeting today, this gathering, is that I believe that it will be a mistake, and many of you have seen the letter that TI has sent up to Congress here in October, calling the Congress to act to include broadband incentives, to include research and development in the current stimulus package. It will be a mistake and a missed opportunity if we don't call on Congress to move and the new administration to move as soon as possible. As many have mentioned, again, broadband is an enabler of these different applications and services. One critical component that is part of TI's agenda that I want to focus you all on is the research and development side of the industry that doesn't get talked about a lot. It's the pre-competitive dollars that go into these research labs that companies like Telcordia are focusing the dollars for those new technologies. And right now, CEOs are under increasing pressure to cut their capital and OpEx budgets. And from a global standpoint, from a global perspective, the United States is not leading in that environment. And it's arguable that we will not be able to catch up unless we take action now. Take action today and to include research and development in the current stimulus debate and part of this bedrock of the America's innovative spirit. So I want to make sure that, again, we look forward to committing our time and energies and resources, the engineers, the technologists, the innovators, to working with Congress, with the new administration, working with this diverse and again, great group of organizations, nonprofits, companies, and research think tanks to make sure that we bring broadband to all Americans and make that a reality versus a dream that we've been talking about for the last decade. So thank you for your time.
Next, we'll hear from Charles Benton, from the president of the Benton Foundation.
Thank you, Diana. Dollar for his leadership on this critical issue. In the digital age, universal, affordable, and robust broadband is the key to our nation's citizens reaching for and achieving the American dream. On January 20th, 2009, Americans will turn to President Obama to make good on the promises he made during the 2008 election. One clear goal articulated by candidate Obama is that every American should have the highest speed of broadband access, no matter where they live or how much money they have. The goal is not achievable overnight nor with a simple stroke of the pen. However, President Obama can immediately exercise strong leadership to improve the competitiveness of the United States in the global economy by acting to craft a national broadband strategy. A new report the Benton Foundation releases today, an action plan for America using technology and innovation to address our nation's critical challenges, offers a draft executive order to implement the America Competes Act legislation which Senator Obama co-sponsored. Specifically, the Benton Foundation calls on President-elect Obama to take immediate action on creating a National Council on Innovation and Competitiveness, a provision of the law that he helped to perfect, but a mechanism that has been swept under the rug by President Bush. The Presidential Council envisioned by President-elect Obama and Congress in the America Competes Act would include policymakers at the highest level of government and 50 experts chosen by the President. The Council, as envisioned, will deliver by January 1st, 2010, a national broadband strategy, a coherent roadmap of goals and policies that complement and accelerate efforts in the marketplace to achieve universal adoption of affordable, high-speed internet access and use. In 2004, President Bush proclaimed a national goal of universal broadband by the year 2007. As we know, this didn't happen. There was no policy initiative enacted to address the challenge. Meanwhile, as many speakers today have stated, in a globally competitive economy and interconnected world, America's competitors are implementing well-conceived and financed national strategies to dramatically increase our competitive advantage in broadband over the United States. Unless our nation quickly answers this serious challenge, America will continue to export economic growth and good-paying knowledge worker jobs overseas to its better-connected, lower-wage competitors. Our citizens will continue to be denied the benefits of broadband already being enjoyed by citizens of other nations in job creation and economic development, in healthcare and education, in public safety and security, in energy conservation and reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and more. By adopting a bold and imaginative plan on day one to connect all of our citizens to robust and affordable broadband, President Obama will enable America to catch up and to surpass our global competitors on broadband, while at the same time utilizing technology and innovation to address our nation's critical challenges. By so doing, the President can deliver to all our citizens the opportunities they seek for their children and themselves to reach for the American dream in the digital age. Cecilia Garcia is our executive director, sitting right here, and John Mintels is the author of the report. If you want hard copies, they are available here, and they're online as well. So see Cecilia and or John. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Our next speaker is Mark Luker, the Vice President of Intercall.
Good morning, and I will thank you also, Jim. Good work. I'm Mark Luker of EDUCAUSE, the Information Technology Association for Higher Education. As you know, America's colleges and universities played a critical role in the early development of the internet. Yes, we got the fever early. We wired our own campuses by hand before there were standards. We worked with the National Science Foundation and the industry to connect our campuses together with regional networks, which in turn were connected through the NSF-net and the early commercial internet, as well as 2 major scientific sites. Soon after this, we formed an organization called Internet 2 to extend our capabilities beyond anything available commercially at the time, and much later have worked with Internet 2 and now the National Lambda Rail to further push the edge. So together, we in higher education have lived in the future of high-speed networking. We have demonstrated many ways what can be achieved with this kind of broadband capacity. The benefits have been measurable and direct in research, innovation, economic development, healthcare, and of course in higher education and K-12. Broadband has revolutionized them all. In particular, from our viewpoint, big broadband offers the promise of high quality education, higher quality than can be offered without, and greater access, in fact, the potential for access for all, but only if we have true broadband in every home and office in the country. Our nation has always led the world through education and innovation. It's a shining record, but it's a record for ours to lose. We must extend the benefits and opportunities of broadband to all, sooner rather than later, in a united, coordinated, focused national effort if we plan to extend or even maintain our historic leadership in the world of higher education and all the many benefits that it brings. EDUCAUSE has worked toward this goal through a document called Blueprint for Big Broadband, which is available through our site. We're very pleased to join this call to action, work with the other organizations here towards filling out the framework. Thank you very much.
Next, we'll hear from Robert Atkinson, the president of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thanks to Jim and Michael for putting this together and hosting it. We've written a lot on broadband in the last 18 months, everything from where we stand internationally, why we are ranked where we are, why broadband is important, what a national strategy should look like. But I want to focus on just sort of a couple of pieces today, because there's so much in the broadband debate one can focus on. And that's this issue of adoption. Back in 1999, I wrote a report that was somewhat controversial at the time, because we argued that we shouldn't extend universal service funding to broadband, and a lot of people at the time said, oh, we should. And I argued that at the time because very few people had broadband anyway. It sort of didn't make any sense, in our view, to extend it. And secondly, that there really broadband wasn't all that compelling an application back in 1999. There were many things you could live, lots of reasons to live without broadband. You didn't have to have it. It wasn't the same as phone service. We issued a report in October called Digital Quality of Life, and where we looked very comprehensively at how IT or ICT, information communications technology, including broadband, was changing whole areas of our lives, whether it was from healthcare to education to first responders to environmental protection to community economic development and the like. And it was very clear from working on that report that broadband now is this essential feature of not just economic growth, as a lot of people have alluded to, but really improving people's quality of lives. I'll just give you a couple of examples of that. A number of companies, including Intel and other high-tech companies, are working on technologies that will let you monitor your elderly parent at home through broadband technology. So, for example, they have one of the things they're working on is a carpet that essentially is sensor-enabled, and it can tell if your elderly parent, who's perhaps not living with you, has fallen. The Supercomputer Center in North Carolina is working on this pretty amazing technology on asthma monitoring. So families with asthma will be able to have real-time monitoring of air quality, of particulate matter, a whole set of things, including being able to blow into asthma, whatever those devices are, and have that information be relayed directly to their doctor and have feedback in real time. So there's all these really, I think, amazing things that are emerging in the application space that say that broadband is critical. What I think we miss in this debate often is the role of adoption. We did a report last year on explaining international broadband leadership, and one of the really interesting things, at least to us in that report, was one of the reasons we rank 15th or 12th on a per household basis of 30 OECD nations is a big factor is the fact that more Americans don't own computers than in other countries. If we had the same level of computer ownership that our competitors had, we wouldn't be ranked 12th, we'd be ranked something like 6th. So it's not just a broadband issue, it's a digital literacy and computer issue. That I think if we don't address that issue, we can have all the broadband in the world that we would love to have, and we're still not going to get to where we want to go. So I think that suggests that we have to have really better and more robust policies on the demand side. Let me suggest one idea, or two ideas that we had. We released a report earlier in November on the stimulus. I was on a meeting yesterday. I heard a great phrase, which I think is a wonderful phrase, on the stimnovation, which I think should be the new buzzword: stimulus and innovation together. And so one of the proposals that we had, a number, I think we had 8 different specific proposals that you could put in the stimulus package that would get investment in the next 6 to 9 months, but would also have long-term effect. But one of them was extending Lifeline and Link-Up programs to broadband for 1 year, a minimum. As you know, Lifeline and Link-Up are programs. Lifeline is a monthly phone subsidy program. Link-Up is a telephone purchase or installation subsidy. We estimated that for less than $1 billion, you could help 1.5 million low-income families with children to get a subsidized personal computer at home and deeply subsidized broadband service for a year. I think if we did that, not only would we get a lot more people on broadband, but we would stimulate computer sales, we could stimulate telecommunications revenues, and spur economic growth as well in the short run. So I think we need to really think seriously about how we're going to address this challenge, not just on the demands, so not just on the supply side, but as I said, on the demand side. There are lots of groups who are doing interesting things there. Important work like One Economy and Connected Nation and eNorth Carolina. But these efforts, as good as they are, they still aren't at the scale that we need them to be at. So I would suggest that as we go forward in this entire group, that's going to be one of the issues that we focus on. That's one of the issues Congress and the next administration focus on. So thank you very much.
Our final speaker is Libby Beatty, the Executive Director of the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. And I particularly want to thank Jim Ballard. My association with Jim goes back to the early 90s and his team building, where we were both on the same softball team many, many years ago. And he has long been a terrific friend and advocate, so I'm very appreciative of all of his hard work in this area. It's my great pleasure to be here this morning, and as Executive Director of NATOA, which is a national association that represents the communications needs and interests of local governments, we're very honored to be working with such a diverse and talented group of people on such an important matter as national broadband strategy. NATOA adopted its own broadband principles this past year as a guide to help shape broadband policy for our members, and we're equally pleased to have helped shape the framework that's been presented here today. We've also recently recommended that broadband be included in the stimulus package, as well as any other critical infrastructure that's being placed under consideration. As we've seen in communities across the country, the impact of broadband can be transformative, both in the short term and over time. By having access to broadband, our communities are revitalizing their economies, enhancing their educational opportunities, extending the benefits of health care, and improving the quality of life for their citizens every day. By working with our public and private partners, local governments act as a bridge to connect our citizens with access to broadband. Our work includes not only the management of the public's assets, but also ensuring that local needs and interests are addressed by all communications providers. And we also monitor the changes that affect how providers could better serve our community's needs. Local governments have been directly involved in every major infrastructure effort in history, from the provision of electric service to the development of roads and highways and the deployment of telephone and cable television services. Broadband is the infrastructure of the 21st century, just as essential as those earlier infrastructures. Local governments have a vital role to play in seeing our national broadband strategy implemented and bringing the benefits of broadband to our businesses, hospitals, schools, and homes throughout the nation. As with similar efforts in the past, this is a role that local governments look forward to. It's clear that no matter what rankings you choose to look at or numbers you choose to believe, the United States is lagging behind the rest of the world when it comes to broadband. Addressing this problem requires a clear, focused approach with every stakeholder contributing to that common goal. The call to action released today represents exactly what comes from hard work and the collective efforts of such a group. A concise yet crucial set of goals and principles that, followed accordingly, can bring the United States back to its place of global leadership in broadband. On behalf of NATOA, our members, and local governments nationwide, we look forward to our continued work with this prestigious and diverse group in developing our national broadband strategy and thereby ensuring that our country is once more a leader in broadband availability and capacity. Thank you.
So thanks to our speakers, and we should now have time for several questions. I'd like to follow the same policy as in the earlier panel, so if you would state your name and organization, and then your question, that would be terrific.
I'm Jason Patterson, the director of the EMC Authority, which is a state authority that's been working on this whole area of broadband since 2001 in North Carolina. I'd like to address this to the panel, but also the other panel. I want to thank Rob Atkinson for bringing up the lifeline link-up. One of the proposals that we will make to our legislature this year is that they look at lifeline link-up in almost every state, and from our research, it is the working poor who are having the problems purchasing computers and signing on. We can show this over the last 6 years in North Carolina and other states. And so we very much would like to see Lifeline Link Up morph into a program that will allow those folks in those categories to actually purchase computers and go online. Whether it's for a year, 2 years, or 3 years, I'd like to note that it is a federal-state tax credit issue, that the states are involved with the federal government in funding this and have for 30 years. So I wondered if y'all would support something like that and helping us get that across all 50 states.
Okay, so maybe I'll ask.
I support it.
Anybody else on the panel would like to?
Sure, we'd be happy to support that. I think that promoting the technology and keeping those links together are critical, and certainly across all of America it would be something we'd like to see.
It's definitely consistent with NATOA's policies.
We certainly support access for all, as I said, and that is going to require end-to-end computers, not just networks.
Okay, next question.
Please submit the telecommunications reports. What differences do you see amongst yourselves in terms of actually filling out this framework? And if there aren't any differences, why haven't you already filled it out?
Well, I can just say that it is amazing that Jim, you've taken this as far as you've been able to, with the, as you were saying, all the T's, the arguments that were crossing T's and dotting I's. So this is a formidable challenge before us, and clearly the current administration, prior administration, has not seen fit to make this a top priority. Hopefully the next administration will, and everything that you and others have done in bringing us to this point will be helpful on the next step. I hope that your coalition might embrace, in fact, this executive order that we have in our report. It's something you suggested that we talk about now and in the future. And so you're absolutely right, but timing is everything here.
I would just argue and reiterate that there's been a lot of work that's put in this document, and so this is seen as a welcome opportunity to move forward. I would also say that the TI doesn't believe there's going to be a one-size-fits-all for all these problems we're addressing, and so as far as the timing issue, we believe that from putting engineers and researchers back to work, there's got to be an emphasis on the current stimulus package and the broadband tied into that.
I think that what we've discovered in the process of working together as a group is that we have much more in common than we have disagreement. There may be some difficulties, as the first panel and others have alluded to, in the details that have yet to be discovered and worked through. But the fact that so many have come together with a common goal and have been able to come up with such a statement as the call to action today simply evidences the extraordinary need for broadband in our nation and for guidance and for strategy to achieve our goals. And I think that that's the focus for the group, not necessarily our disagreements, but the end goal of how we get to where we need to be.
Another question?
I'm Paul Van Houten. I'm the director of ctechnology.org. We're a nonprofit that works directly in local communities for bringing educational internet access and broadband into communities. One of the things that I heard from the gentleman from EDUCAUSE is the importance of K-12 and the K-12 environment in terms of how that affects broadband. Would you advocate a linkage of expanding the E-rate program to incorporate home access for K-12 students, which would be a real bottom-up stimulus? Some of the studies that we've done, we've seen rural disconnect rates as high as 47% of a K-12 system without broadband access in their homes in rural areas. That's a very significant issue in K-12. It directly affects education in the United States. I've met kids in classrooms in the last year that don't know what podcast is. So this is a very significant issue in terms of our competitiveness for our children. And I'm just wondering if that would be a potential stimulus for driving not only access but broadband reach in rural areas.
We would certainly support some version of stimulus for the user interface devices. I have to point out they're changing very rapidly as we speak, both in configuration and cost. Whether this should be done through modification of E-rate or not is something that would take a lot of discussion. In our own big broadband document, we proposed a separate fund because of the political complications of modifying E-rate.
Can I just add something? You brought up E-rate. I think it's important to recognize that. I think the debate in the U.S. is so oftentimes about how we don't do a very good job, and certainly we've said that. But I think it's important to realize that the one area we are the world leader at, according to a recent OECD study that came out maybe 3-4 months ago, we are the world leader on computers and broadband in schools. We're far ahead of any other country in the world on that. And I think that has to be principally due to the E-rate program. And so I think we at least should acknowledge that we do have some successes in the country and we can build on those.
there another question?
Ted Chapin, I'm with Broadband Incorporated in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm curious to know if there is any consideration given to educating these new consumers that are going to be open to the ability to get online with computers and the internet, and maybe they haven't had the experience with that before, right? You know, the growth of the middle class in China opened up a whole bunch of unprotected computers for exploitation. What are we, is there a plan to prevent the same thing happening to these new consumers in the United States?
Well, I would just say that local governments have been involved local and state governments for a very long time in providing access to broadband through government, through schools and libraries, and for providing public access. So our ability to not only continue to do so, but to improve and enhance those services is going to be critical to our success.
I would just add there's an important role for education, especially K-12, in computer literacy, internet safety, learning how to successfully navigate the entire system and get your best advantage out of it.
Let me just add one point. In addition to schools and libraries, this year, or perhaps late last year, in fact, exactly a year ago, the FCC put aside $420 million for rural health care. And that is a very interesting initiative. It's a pilot project. The chairman of the FCC said in his comments about this that he hoped this pilot project would lead to, would build the momentum for universal adoption of the internet and broadband in rural health care. Another key dimension.
Well, thanks to all of you for being here today. Thank you for this. My closing word is this. If we can present 9 distinguished speakers, opening statements, extensive Q&A, and come within 10 minutes of our scheduled time, we can make America the #1 broadband country in the world. Thank you all.